So for the 60-second sound off, I'd come into the studio. Usually I'd have somebody with me and set up the camera, do all that stuff, set up the mic, and then I just talk about sports and about NC State sports.
What was your favorite sport to talk about?
Favorite sport to talk about? Ooh, probably football. But the way I had to do it, I just had to talk, and then, I'd go over. I'd try to go over by 3 or 4 minutes because some of the stuff you say just isn't funny or just not good or doesn't make sense.
Has anything you've ever said been funny?
No, but you end up repeating yourself and stuff like that, so you want to...
Say that part again.
Say what again?
That last one.
You end up repeating.
That's pretty funny.
That was funny.
All right.
So you end up repeating yourself and you want to take that out when you're editing so that it sounds good. So I try to aim for 2.5 minutes of talking, and then sometimes I would just sit here and not have anything to talk about, so I just have to think about it. So usually at the beginning I'd be talking for 8 to 10 minutes, and I'd be talking on the longer end, probably closer to 5 minutes, but then I'd also just have nothing to say for some of that time.
Did you write the stuff ahead of time?
No, I did not write this stuff ahead of time. I spewed it out as I talked, and that was just how I did it, because once I started talking about something, I would just keep going. Like once I started talking about Ryan Finley, I'd go into the receivers and then the offense and then whatever.
But the premise of the show, you were complaining usually.
Yeah, usually complaining. Sometimes we played well and I didn't have anything to complain about, but
Those are few and far between.
those were few and far between, yeah.
Least favorite sport to talk about?
Least favorite sport to talk about? I really only talked about football and basketball. I talked about baseball a little bit. So I guess probably baseball, because baseball is my favorite sport, but most people aren't interested in baseball. So
How did you choose what to talk about?
recent events. So during football season, I talk about football. Basketball season, talk about basketball. And I try to get it up after the game. I remember when we beat Duke in Cameron when Dennis was here, we went in that night and did it actually. And I thought it was a really good idea at the time. It didn't turn out as great as I hoped, but definitely recent events, and try to get it up the week after at least, preferably at the beginning of the week.
And how long is it?
60 seconds.
So,
It ends up about 50 seconds, or maybe 52, I want to say, after the intro and the ending. Well, not the end, there's not really an ending, but there's probably like 52, 55 seconds that you have to talk. And when you're editing, it really gets tough. You have to make some difficult decisions about stuff to cut. And
so how did you end the show? Like when that
With the
60
buzzer.
seconds comes up, what happens?
there's a buzzer, you just cut yourself off. I usually try to end with something that I thought was funny. But
So if you could tell people getting ready to start out doing this show in the PRC class, what would you recommend? How would you recommend they do it?
I would recommend having a conversation with somebody. That's how it started out for me. Have somebody on the other side of the camera who can ask you questions, and then when you go to edit out what if the mic can pick them up. Well, definitely edit it out, because I didn't have any empty space. I was talking the whole time, so you wouldn't have been able to hear questions. But definitely have somebody talk to you, ask you questions, and then once you get going, you're probably going to be fine. You just have to imagine. Once you get going, you have to imagine that you're talking to somebody. But I definitely recommend. I would always try to have somebody have a conversation with me. It got harder the more I did it, because they would just get bored of it or whatever. So, yeah, definitely try to have a conversation with somebody.